The invitation to the annual Bennett family reunion lay on my desk, its golden embossed lettering gleaming in the morning sunlight filtering through my loft's expansive windows. 15 years of carefully crafted deception were about to collapse, and strangely enough, it wasn't even my choice. I picked up my phone and reread the email that set everything in motion. Forbes 30 under 40, the rising star of digital art. Emily Bennett's NFT empire hits $3.5 billion valuation. The article was set to be published tomorrow, just 2 days before the family reunion. My meticulously built facade was on the verge of crumbling, and there was nothing I could do about it. Emily, your brother Jack is on line 1 again. My assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. Of course he was. He'd been calling non-stop ever since the press release hit major news outlets. I took a deep breath and answered the call. Hello, Jack. What the hell, Emily? He didn't waste any time with pleasantry. I just got a call from Business Insider asking for a comment about my billionaire sister. Want to explain that? I leaned back in my chair, gazing out over the city skyline. I guess you'll have to wait for the article, just like everyone else. Cut the crap, he snapped. All these years you've let us think you were barely getting by. Mom and Dad have been worried sick about you. I couldn't suppress a laugh. Worried? Is that what you call it? The constant lectures about getting a real job, the snide comments about how I'm wasting my potential. They were just trying to help, he retorted. No, I said, shaking my head. They were trying to control me, just like they tried to control you. There was a long silence. Jack had always been the golden child, following our parents' perfectly laid out plans. Business school, MBA, joining Dad's investment firm. The perfect son who never strayed from the script. Just tell me one thing, he said, his voice quieter now. How long have you been hiding this? I stood up and walked to the window, watching as my personal helicopter touched down on the nearby helipad, one of 3 I owned. I turned to him. Remember when I moved to that tiny apartment in Brooklyn, the one you thought was a phase when I first started with my digital art nonsense? I asked. He paused. That was 15 years ago. That's right. Everyone thought I was crazy, throwing away my finance degree to doodle on computers, as Dad put it. But what none of you knew was that I had already sold my first NFT collection for and 6 months later, another one. By the time Dad was saying it was just a phase at Christmas dinner, I had already made my first million. I could almost hear him processing the math in his head. But you still borrowed money from Mom and Dad for rent. You drove that old Civic until last year. I never borrowed money from them, Jack. I interrupted. I asked them to invest in my company. They refused. Loudly, repeatedly. The Civic was a choice, not a necessity. Just like this penthouse, the jets and everything else I kept hidden from all of you. Private jet. His voice broke. Jesus, Emily, how rich are you exactly? I let the question hang in the air as I stared out over the city, knowing that everything was about to change. I smiled, remembering all the family dinners where they treated me like the poor relative. The way our younger brother Ethan would always ostentatiously pick up the check, making sure everyone knew he was helping out his struggling artist sibling. The Forbes article would say $3.8 billion, but that was a conservative estimate. The real number was closer to $5 billion. The sound Ethan made was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued, I have a board meeting to attend. Oh, and Ethan, I'll see you at the family reunion. I'm thinking of making a grand entrance. I hung up before he could respond and pressed the intercom. Sarah, is everything set for the reunion? Yes, Miss Bennett. The jet is fueled and ready. The car service is arranged for all family members to be picked up in Rolls-Royces. The venue has been updated to the private island as requested, and the NDAs have been prepared for all staff. Perfect. I picked up the reunion invitation. For 15 years I'd played the role they expected, the artistic black sheep who couldn't handle the real world. The daughter who needed constant reminders about financial responsibility. The sister who was pitied and patronized at every family gathering. But not this time. My phone buzzed with a text from my youngest sister, Chloe. Oh me, Soph. Please tell me this Forbes thing is a joke. What's going on? I left it unanswered. Chloe, who never failed to mention her 6-figure salary at every family gathering. Chloe, who loved to reminisce about how she had made it while her big sister was still finding herself. The intercom buzzed again. Miss Bennett, your parents are both on the line. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I checked my watch. Sarah, call the helipad. I think I'll take the chopper to the board meeting today. As I gathered my things, my mind wandered back to the day that started it all. The day I decided to hide my success from my family, 15 years earlier. Digital art isn't real art, Soph. My father's voice boomed across the dinner table. And this NFT nonsense. It's a fad, a scam. No one's going to pay real money for pictures on a computer. I sat there 22 years old, fresh out of college, trying to explain my vision to my family. The same family that had paid for an Ivy League finance degree they expected me to use at my father's firm. Actually, Dad, I said, I just sold my first collection for enough. He cut me off. I don't want to hear about your little hobby. You come work for the firm like we planned, or you're on your own. No more support, no more safety net. My mother reached across the table, patting my hand condescendingly. Sweetie, we just want what's best for you. You need stability, a real career. I looked around the table at their faces. My father's disappointment, my mother's concerned frown, Ethan's smug smile, and Chloe's barely concealed disdain. That was the moment I made my decision. I wouldn't tell them about the $50,000 sale, or the 3 galleries that wanted to represent me, or the tech companies reaching out about collaborations. You're right, I said, standing up. I need to figure this out on my own. 2 weeks later, I moved into the smallest, cheapest studio apartment I could find in Brooklyn. My family assumed I was struggling, living on my savings, too proud to admit defeat. In reality, I was building an empire. The first year was intense. I worked 18-hour days, developing my artistic style, learning about blockchain technology, and building connections in the crypto art world. My first major collection, Digital Dreams in Binary, sold out in hours, bringing in. I took that money and invested it back into the business, hiring developers, creating new platforms for artists, innovating in ways the traditional art world couldn't even imagine. But every time I visited home, I drove my old Honda, wore simple clothes, and lived the part of the struggling artist. At least let me help with your rent, my mother would offer, while my father shook his head in disappointment. No thanks, Mom. I never borrowed money, Mom. I'd tell her I asked you and Dad to invest in my company. That's the difference. And everything else, the apartment, the car, that was all just theater. Her voice rose, shaking with disbelief. You've been lying to us for 50. No, Mom, I replied, keeping my tone steady. I just let you see what you wanted to see. You all were so convinced I was failing, that you never bothered to look closer. She sank into one of my Italian leather chairs, looking suddenly small and fragile. Does anyone else know in the family? No one, I said. Well, Marcus found out yesterday when the press release went out. I suppose he tried to warn you. She nodded weakly. He called, but your father was sure it was a mistake. Some other Sophia Sullivan. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a file. Here's something that might interest you. I slid it across the table to her. The investment opportunity I tried to present to Dad 3 years ago. If he had invested the $1 million I asked for, his share would be worth roughly 100. Her hands trembled as she took the file, scanning through the numbers. He said, you wanted a handout, that you were too proud to admit your art wasn't working out. She paused, her voice faltering. And you believed him, just like you believed him about my struggling artist's life. Tell me, Mom, I said quietly, taking a seat across from her. Did any of you ever bother to look at my work, to research what I was really doing? Did you ever ask me about my projects, or did you just assume I was wasting my time? She couldn't meet my eyes, her guilt hanging heavily in the air. You know, when I sold my first NFT collection, I continued, I had already made more money than Dad made in a year, but I never told you about that. I kept pretending because I thought you'd never understand. She sighed, looking at the file again. I never thought you were failing, Sophia. I just didn't understand any of it. And your father, he didn't either. He thought you were just going through a phase. I smiled faintly, the truth of the moment sinking in. It was never a phase, Mom. It was a revolution, one that I built in silence, while everyone else thought I was just an artist struggling to make it. She looked up at me, the realization dawning in her eyes. I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have believed in you. I nodded, not needing her apology, but appreciating the honesty. It's not about you believing in me, Mom. It was about me believing in myself. I don't need validation from anyone anymore. I've built this empire on my own, without your support. But now you see the fruits of that labor. She looked out the window, her expression softening. I can't even imagine how much you've accomplished. Well, you're about to, I replied. Everything changes now. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything finally lifting. I'll see you at the family reunion. I think it's time for you all to learn who I really am. As I escorted her to the elevator, I couldn't help but feel a sense of power, a sense of vindication. It had taken 15 years to get here, to this moment of reckoning, but now the world would finally know the truth about Sophia Sullivan. And so would my family. Mom, In 15 years, did any of you ever actually come to one of my shows, check out my work, or even Google my name? I asked, watching her shift uncomfortably. She couldn't meet my eyes. That's what I thought. I turned and walked to the window, looking down at the city I now partially owned. The annual family reunion was in 2 days, and I'd made some changes to the arrangements, big changes. I'd bought out the entire resort where it was supposed to be held, and turned it into a private venue. Instead, everyone would be picked up in my private cars, and taken to my jet. We'd be having the reunion on my island. Your island? She stammered, blinking in disbelief. Yes, in the Caribbean. I bought it last year when I closed my first billion-dollar deal. I turned to face her, my smile widening. And Mom, this time I won't be the one sitting quietly, while everyone talks about their successes. This time I have some things to say. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. Your father, when he sees all this, he'll finally have to admit that his little girl, playing with computer pictures, built something bigger than his entire family legacy. I smiled and said, that's just the beginning. I walked her to the elevator, but before she could step in, I added one last thing. Oh, and Mom, that Bentley you've been dreaming about. But Dad says it's too expensive? I bought 3 last month. Just because I could. The elevator doors closed on her shocked face. As soon as she was gone, I called my assistant. Sarah, is everything ready for the reunion? Yes, Miss Sullivan. The island staff is prepared. The documentation packages have been assembled for each family member, showing exactly when they dismissed your investment opportunities, and what those shares would be worth today. The video presentation of your success timeline is ready. Perfect, I replied, picking up my phone. I finally replied to the family group chat with a single message. Looking forward to seeing everyone at the reunion. Dress appropriately for a private island. Transportation will be provided. Then I opened my laptop to check the market. The Forbes article had sent my company's stock soaring. Another billion added to my net worth before breakfast. I thought about my father, probably sitting in his office right now, trying to understand how his failing daughter had quietly become one of the richest people in the country. About my sister Chloe, who loved to brag about her 6-figure salary and vacation home in the Hamptons, realizing I could buy her entire life with what I make in interest each day. The reunion was going to be interesting. Very interesting indeed. My phone buzzed again, a message from my father. We need to meet before the reunion. Family matters should be discussed privately. I typed back, everything will be discussed at the reunion, Dad. After all, isn't that what family reunions are for? Sharing our successes. I called Sarah again. Contact the design team. I want the island's helipad repainted before the reunion, and make sure my name is visible from the air when they land. Already done, Miss Sullivan. Anything else? I thought about 15 years of condescension, of pity, of being treated like the family failure. Yeah, make sure the Forbes article is framed and hanging in every room of the island resort. I want it to be the first thing they see, no matter where they turn. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window, successful, powerful, and finally ready to show my family exactly who I'd become while they were busy doubting me. The countdown to the reunion had begun. The day of the Bennett family reunion dawned clear and bright. I stood on the tarmac of my private airfield, watching as 3 Rolls-Royces approached in formation. My family had arrived. The cars stopped and the doors opened. First came my father, his usual commanding presence diminished somehow. My mother, still looking shaken from our meeting 2 days ago. Ethan, Chloe, and various aunts, uncles, and cousins followed, all wearing expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed resentment. And there, front and center, sat my gleaming private jet, with Sullivan Digital Empire emblazoned on its side in elegant lettering. Welcome everyone, I said, my voice carrying across the tarmac. I trust the ride was comfortable. Sophia, my father, stepped forward, trying to regain his authoritative tone. This is unnecessary. We could have had a perfectly good reunion at the resort. The resort was too public, Dad. Besides, I think it's time for some real family bonding on my island. Your island? Chloe muttered, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Of course you have an island. The flight was interesting to say the least. As my family members settled into the luxurious cabin, their eyes darted everywhere, taking in the opulent details, the solid gold fixtures, the rare art pieces, the vintage champagne being served by immaculately trained staff. Is that a real Picasso? Aunt Patricia whispered, staring at the artwork mounted on a cabin wall. Yes, I replied casually. I bought it last year along with a few others. My father cleared his throat. Sophia, perhaps we should discuss. We'll discuss everything when we land, Dad. For now, enjoy the flight. The champagne is particularly good. Cost more than your company's quarterly profits. He flinched, and I couldn't help but smile. 2 hours later we began our descent. Through the windows my private island came into view, 300 acres of tropical paradise, with a state-of-the-art resort complex at its center, and there, visible from the air just as I'd planned, was my name in letters large enough to be seen from space. Sullivan. As we landed I heard Olivia gasp. The helipad was surrounded by displays showing my most successful NFT collections, each with their sale prices prominently displayed. Millions upon millions of dollars in digital art projected onto massive screens. Welcome to Sullivan Island, I announced as we disembarked. My own little piece of paradise. Little, Marcus choked out, looking at the resort complex sprawled before us. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, seamlessly blended with natural beauty. Everyone's rooms have been assigned, I continued. You'll find some reading material waiting for you. I suggest you review it before dinner. The reading material was carefully curated for each family member. For my father, documentation of every investment opportunity of mine he had dismissed, along with current valuations. For Olivia, a comparison of her annual salary versus what I made in interest each day. For Marcus, details of how his firm had lost millions by refusing to work with my company. I gave them an hour to settle in and digest the information, then I had them summoned to the main dining room. The room was a masterpiece of design, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. A massive table dominated the space, each place setting probably worth more than most people's cars, and on every wall that Forbes article beautifully framed. My family filed in slowly, looking shell-shocked. They changed for dinner, but even their expensive clothes looked somehow inadequate in these surroundings. Please sit, I gestured to the table. We have a lot to discuss. Sophia, my father began as soon as everyone was seated. I think I speak for everyone when I say, we're surprised? I laughed softly. That's an interesting word choice. Not angry that I deceived you, not hurt that I hid my success. Just surprised. We didn't know, my mother said quietly. You didn't want to know, I corrected her. Every time I tried to tell you about my work, you changed the subject. Every time I offered investment opportunities, you dismissed them. You were so convinced I was failing that you couldn't see my success, even when it was right in front of you. But the apartment, Olivia interjected. The old car, all those times you let me pay for dinner because you thought I couldn't afford it. I finished for her. Did you enjoy that, Olivia? Playing the successful sister, making sure everyone knew you were helping out poor struggling Sophia. She had the grace to look ashamed. Let me show you something, I said, pressing a button to reveal a screen displaying a timeline of my journey. The successes, the milestones, and the moments when they doubted me. As you can see, I continued, there were plenty of chances you all had to support me, to invest, to believe in me, but you didn't. And that's fine. I didn't need you then, and I don't need you now. I pressed another button, and screens descended from the ceiling, displaying a timeline of my success alongside their dismissive comments over the years. 2008. Digital art isn't real art, Dad. My first collection sells for 2010. When are you going to get a real job? Mom. Company valuation hits $10 million. 2015. At least I can afford to help my sister out. Olivia, net worth passes $500 million. 2020. We don't invest in internet pictures. Dad's firm. Company valuation reaches $1 billion. Every doubt, every dismissal, every condescending comment, I said quietly. I remembered them all, and with each one I built something bigger. Why? My father's voice cracked. Why hide it? Because you needed to learn something, all of you did. I replied. Success doesn't look just one way. Innovation doesn't follow your predetermined path. And sometimes the child you wrote off as a failure might just be the one who succeeds beyond your wildest dreams. I stood up, walking to the window, gazing out at the island. Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the secrecy, not pretending to struggle. It was watching you all celebrate mediocrity while dismissing true innovation. Mediocrity, Marcus bristled. Yes, mediocrity. You followed Dad's safe path. Marcus got the job he wanted you to get, made the safe investments. And you, I turned to Olivia. You bragged about your 6-figure salary while I was making that much in minutes. That's enough. My father stood up, his face reddening. You've made your point. We were wrong. Is that what you want to hear? No, Dad, I said, shaking my head. What I want is for you to understand, really understand this. I gestured to the luxury around us. It isn't about money, it's about vision. The vision you couldn't see because you were too busy clinging to the past. I pressed another button and new images appeared on the screen. My latest project, A revolutionary platform that will transform how digital art is created, bought, and sold. It launches next month, I said. Conservative estimates put its value at $10 billion. I'm showing you this because for once, I want you to see what I'm building before it happens. No more dismissing it, no more doubting. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice soft but sincere. We're proud of you, Sophia. We should have been proud all along. Thank you, Mom, I replied. But I didn't do this for your pride. I did it because it was my dream, my vision. I smiled. And now it's my empire. So what happens now? Marcus asked, his tone still unsure. Now we have dinner as a family, I said. But this time we'll do it my way. No more pretending, no more hiding. And tomorrow we'll tour the island, and I'll show you exactly what your daughter, sister and niece has built while you weren't paying attention. I raised my glass to the truth. Finally they raised their glasses, looking somewhat dazed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of gourmet food, fine wine, and gradually thawing conversations. My family was beginning to see me, really see me for the first time in 15 years. As they retired to their rooms that night, I stayed in the dining room, looking out at the moonlit ocean. My assistant Sarah appeared at my side. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. The big reveal? I thought about the looks on their faces. The shock, the realization, the gradual understanding. Yes, I said, but not for the reasons I expected. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about finally being free to be completely myself. And tomorrow? Sarah asked, with a knowing smile. Tomorrow, I smiled. We show them the future. Their safe, predictable world of traditional investments and conventional success is over. It's time for them to understand that the daughter they wrote off as a dreamer wasn't just dreaming. She was building a new world while they weren't looking. Later that night, I found a note that had been slipped under my door. In my father's handwriting, it read, I was not just about the business, but about everything. You didn't just succeed, you revolutionized an entire industry. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner, Dad. I placed the note in a frame right next to my first NFT sale receipt for $50,000, a reminder of where I started and how far I'd come. The next morning, as I watched my family gather for breakfast, their attitudes suddenly changed. I realized something important. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. Sometimes, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in the revealing of success, but in the quiet knowledge that you built something extraordinary while everyone else was busy doubting you. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Sullivan Digital Empire announces revolutionary new platform. The future was calling, and this time my family would watch it unfold in real time. No more hiding, no more pretending.